Hello and welcome back to another episode of 99.9%. I am Samantha Page, and today I am here with Justin Winley. He is a film and screen major at Pace University. He has one of the most decorated resumes I've seen from a college student,
Thank
honestly.
you.
He has martial arts on there, and then he also interned at a production company called Firelight Media. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is Justin Winley. How are you today?
Hi, Samantha. I'm good. Thank you for having me. I will say, as far as the resume is concerned, I mean, everything on there is true, but you do learn how to embellish certain things just to to give yourself a bit more beef in the resume. But yeah, no, I've definitely been fortunate to have the opportunities I've had for sure.
Awesome. So, how has college been with the pandemic and everything? Your classes online?
Yes. So, I mean, it's funny. I often joke with my friends about like how when this first broke out in February, we were all like, "Oh, well, we'll be back in like 2 weeks. This will blow right over." And now it's October, and we never, no one could have seen this coming. And obviously, the buzzword is unprecedented, but that's really what it is. And I mean, it was interesting because coming back into the fall semester, we were getting a lot of correspondence from the university about how like classes had adjusted to Zoom so it wouldn't be like how it was when we had to do it impromptu last semester. It's pretty much the same. Like there was really no, I mean, there are still professors who don't know how to use the platform, who routinely, even when things were hybrid, and there were some students in the class and then some students on a Zoom station, routine technical issues with that. It's like if you guys had a whole summer to figure this out, I'm not really sure why your professors are still like unsure what they're doing. It's unfair to them as educators. It's unfair to us as students who are paying. It's just it didn't really look great. And like a lot of my film classes, like you said up top, I am a film and screen major, film and screen studies major. And a lot of my film classes so far, like the way Pace usually does them, is they'll be once a week, and because it's only once a week, they're meeting for a longer amount of time. So I have a directing class that meets from 1:20 to 5:20 on Wednesdays, which is 4 hours. It's not, we don't always meet because it's partially asynchronous, but like 4 hours in a classroom is already like,
Crazy.
it's 4 hours in your own room looking at your computer, like when your bed is right behind you and you really want to just go lay down. That's really the challenge. But it's been something that I've stepped up to. And honestly, what I've just been saying is like, I'm really glad none of my classes got canceled. What you may not know is that I'm a transfer student. Before Pace University, I was at SUNY Geneseo, and before that, I did a semester at Borough Manhattan Community College. So it feels like I've been in school forever. And though I am a junior now, I still have 3 semesters left, roughly. And I was very concerned at one point that like they wouldn't be able to salvage certain classes. I'm taking 18 credits, so like even like losing even one of those would have set me back. So I'm very, very glad that that didn't happen. Yeah.
To a film and screen studies, like what does that entail? Because I'm a mass media major and we study the production of shows and we produce
Mhm.
shows. So, what exactly do you study?
Sure. So, what I actually found out last semester, um, they were hiring. There was a hiring process for some new adjuncts in the film major, and I kind of wound up being wrapped into that process as like a student advisor almost, because what they would do is they would have guest lecturers come in to different film classes and lead, and then like the students would get to ask some questions based on their lectures, and the chair of the department would also usually be there. And at some point she heard me asking questions, and so she conferred with one of the other senior professors in the department, and she was like, hey, like my former professor Ruth Johnston, who I love, she's a lovely sweet old lady. She was like, oh yeah, this is my student Justin and he'd be great for this process. And so the chair, Dr. Zimmer, was like, yeah, you asked some really great questions, like, if would you want to help us kind of group interview these people some more? And I was like, sure. so in that process, I got to learn a little more about the machinations of the major above just the classes, the day-to-day stuff. And I found out that it's relatively new, the film department. It was actually born out of the English department, I think only like 3 years ago, 3 or 4 years ago. So even though maybe they had film courses, it wasn't like an established um, major necessarily. So that being said, I think that contributes a lot to why it's still very I want to say like it's still in a prototype phase. We don't at the New York City campus really have access to a lot of production equipment, at least not yet. And really what our course load is a lot of historical and analytical stuff, which is fine because I'm a writer and like that's my kind of wheelhouse. But I obviously at some point, I mean, the reason I even came into film and screen studies was because I went to high school for acting, but I didn't want to go to conservatory necessarily. I felt that I'd gotten what I needed for my acting career or my acting, I guess, yeah, for my acting. Um, but I wanted to study film because I love film so much as a medium, and I'm also a writer. So I was like, let me get a glance at the screenwriting process, about the production process, and let me also make sure that I'm never like an ignorant actor. You know, I don't want to be the guy who's on set and doesn't understand why we need to take longer to set up a certain shot or why something needs to be pushed another day or whatever. Like, I never want to have ego like that. Um, so that was a big motivator for me finally settling on film and screen studies after going through stuff like communications. I was doing media at some point. At some point, I thought I wanted to be a psychology major, or social psychology, or whatever. Like, I got to Pace and I was like, I'm tired and I know what I want to do for the rest of my life. So let's just get this film degree and go for it. But it really is a lot of, you know, there's history of film, art of film that you have to take. Seminar on film was a class I took last semester, which is very discussion based. Specifically, that was the class I took with Professor Johnston, and she likes to lead it with a different theme each time she teaches. So this time we were looking at memory in film, cultural memory, individual memory, and how film language manipulates memory in the viewer sometimes to achieve a certain effect. So you think of a movie like, I don't know if you've ever seen Memento, Christopher Nolan, good movie. Yeah, it's good. But that's a classic example. And yeah, it's just been a lot of theory stuff like that. But I do hope at some point to be able to make use of some sort of production equipment, especially because we have another major for film, television, voiceover, commercial actors. That's in like the performing arts school, and they get equipment, but like there, I don't, as far as I know, there's no crossover between their major and ours. So that seems like a no-brainer to me, but I don't make the rules.
Yeah, I know here getting production equipment is hard too.
Mm,
I know when school wasn't, when COVID wasn't a thing,
right.
you could easily go to two locations. The Cage, they call it the Cage. That's where like all of like the expensive stuff is. And then like the media, mass media, new media, what is it called? It's like called new media.
Something. It's got a name.
Time and now I can't remember the name, but you can check out equipment there. But now it's been kind of challenging, I would say,
Mm,
because everyone has all these projects, and then you have people who are out of town, and then they check out the equipment, and then they don't bring it back in time. So it has been hard over here as well. So I think that's any type of media major right now. It is
yeah,
right now since we can't really
absolutely.
do much. Um, but I wanted to ask, because the sole purpose of this podcast is to really um, look into the experiences of community leaders and people who have changed the community for a great way, in a good way. Change their community in a good way by using their talent. So I
Mm,
wanted to talk about the film Rush. You provided me with the YouTube link, which I will post
mm,
underneath this
I
podcast.
appreciate it.
And it was pretty cool. So Rush is about two black college students who go and rush for, I want to say, a historically white
Yes,
fraternity. And things definitely went left.
they did.
It reminded me of that Netflix movie. I can't, it's not, why am I forgetting things? Do you know what I'm talking about though? It's a Netflix movie and it's about a fraternity and
uh,
things go left.
Netflix is always putting out like it's like 7 movies a week. So I mean, we could take a Google break.
Because what? Next Netflix movie about fraternity going left.
Google be like, oh,
Burning
this.
Sands.
Oh, Burning Sands. Okay, I don't think they might be on Netflix, but I don't think it was unless they remade it. Like I do think Burning Sands is like from the 90s or the early aughts. I've never seen it, but yes, I have heard of that movie, and it did come up when people watch this for sure.
There is a Netflix original and it's called Burning Sands, and that is what this short film reminded me of. When we think of fraternity life, especially amongst Black fraternities, it's definitely stigmatized that things happen that are not supposed to be happening.
Hmm.
I don't really hear much with white fraternities unless it's on a broader aspect, unless it makes it to like national news. I know a university from back home, Florida State University, got in trouble and they banned all fraternities off of
Mm.
for some time. So, what was it like doing that? And
Yeah,
because when I saw it, I forgot it was a film at one point. The way
that's
that
good.
it was acted, the way that you really got in character kind of frightened me a little bit. But so how did the film, how was that process? What was that?
Thank you. Well, yeah, I say thank you. Obviously, it's always one of the greatest compliments an actor can receive is uh, that you forgot that they weren't that person. Um, and I it would risk spoiling the film to explain why Samantha feels that way. So I'll just kind of leave it at what she said and let listeners, decide for themselves. Um, but yeah, it was funny how that even came about because also at Pace is where I met my good friend Wes Goodrich, the director and writer of Rush. And he was actually the president of the Black Student Union when I came to Pace. And then he graduated and we've stayed in contact. And he was telling me that he was working on this short film. And I was like, oh, like, you got like a part for your boy, like what's up? And he didn't even know that I was an actor. He was like, oh wait, you act? How was I not aware of this? So then he had me read for it, for that part of Sam. Yeah, I think it was Sam. And it worked, and we got into development together. Rush was very interesting to me immediately because of what it had to say about masculinity, and that was something that Wes was interested in as well. Like that was his intention in writing it. We discussed that as the things that men do in the name of
Brother.
manliness, yeah, and brotherhood and all of that that are really inherently harmful regardless of gender, but that men in our own kind of cultural conditioning of ourselves across generations, we've convinced ourselves that this is just, that boys will be boys, right? The whole thing. And even though there is a clear racial difference in the film, it was interesting uh, in discovering the project that Wes wasn't necessarily trying to make it like a Django Unchained, like here are these two slaves fighting each other type of thing in front of the white masters, right? I mean, it has that subtext, but it was also like there's a high amount of callousness and apathy in this fraternity, and for their entertainment they are willing to pit these two people against each other, you know. And you know, whether this is something that's happened routinely, you know, what does happen in the film, whether like this ritual is something that they do all the time, and whether it always goes that far or not is like, that's kind of up for interpretation. um but yeah, I mean, as far as discovering my character too, it was like, I mean, it's a short film, right? So you know, there's not too much time to really like, or even too much material necessarily to dig into, but also, if anything, it gives you more opportunity to read between the lines. And you know, there are no small parts, just small actors, right? That's the old adage. So um with Sam, I kind of we were really interested in finding someone who is um obviously introverted, who is maybe less in touch with his like masculinity in terms of like his presence and his stature, you know, and who is lonely and is looking for community. um and he doesn't realize, and he's also someone who's pushed constantly, and we try to set that up in the movie as well. His manliness is challenged, his masculinity is challenged, and obviously it comes to a head. Um but that that loneliness, it winds up that like he is willing to kind of, you know, make sacrifices so that he can feel like he's part of something. And I think that that's what's really powerful about the script in Rush, and that's what spoke to me, aside from it being also just like creepy and like kind of like a having like a horror movie angle to it, being this like, you know, because I it's funny, I once and let me know if I'm talking too much, but I once I posted a poll on my Instagram story after the movie came out, and I was like, how would y'all categorize Rush? And I put it as like I put a few different genres. I put like a folk tale, um, a thriller, a horror movie, or a coming of age story. And my answer's always been it's a coming of age.
Yes.
Um, it's only a few minutes long, but it's like it kind of follows those same beats, just in a more insidious, negative way. But it also kind of has a happy ending, weirdly, at least for one of the people.
One person ending.
Right, right.
But when you were talking about brotherhood and solidarity, I have two things I would like to talk to you about. So,
Sure.
what was your experience working with the community for the Black and Latino males? Was that like a brotherhood type of thing as well?
Yes. So Alma has just begun. What is currently Alma used to be UMI, the Urban Male Initiative. It was when I joined the university that was being headed up by Marvin DeBose, who no longer works at Pace, but it was underneath the umbrella of the Office of Multicultural Affairs, which is kind of like the parent department for like the cultural clubs like BSU, Latin American Student Association, Caribbean African Student Association, all that. Um, and you know, after Marvin left, UMI kind of began to falter. They weren't really sure what the direction they were going in was. It was and still is meant to be a kind of it's a, oh, what's the word? It's supposed to ensure the maintenance and successful matriculation of men of color on campus, right? Because there aren't too many of us at Pace. And I think, you know, I mean, over the summer, I was through connection with Dr. Denise Santiago, who heads up OMA, along with some other professors in the university. They invited me into this discussion about, okay, how are we going to revitalize what is a vital aspect of our community and what we think is necessary. We wanted to get rid of the name because I think we're seeing a general cultural understanding that like the word urban is like a very coded
Yeah.
term. you know, and we saw them. I think they removed it in one of these award shows, the Grammys or whatever, one of the music awards. They took it. It's not urban music anymore, like they're calling it hip hop or something. But in the same way, we didn't want to say urban male initiative. We wanted to make sure we were doing something that was like direct, you know, because there's no problem saying words like Black and Latino. Um, so it's still fledgling, it's still new, but I mean, I'm excited to tackle it as a student coordinator for a lot of those reasons that that Rush kind of talks about. It is that like I'm very interested in deconstructing these myths of manhood and creating a healthy environment, you know, for men to express themselves and to figure out, you know, yeah, what is being a man? What is manhood aside from the violence? You know,
You connected with your character in Rush?
say that again.
Is that why you think you connected with your character in Rush so well?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think that yeah. Again, I think that we are we're not very good at showing men how to assert themselves, how to be leaders without hurting someone.
Mhm.
And I think that the mission behind Alma right now, the community for Black and Latino men, um, is, at least for me, one of it is like, okay, you know, because I think that there is it's a an unsure time, I'll say, to be a young man because of, you know, because if you're at all sympathetic and you listen at all to women, then you understand that, like, and even just look at history, like men have not done a lot of good things. I mean, there's been a lot of great men, of course, but like a lot of the historical tragedies and missteps and you know, violences again have been perpetrated by men. And you know, just 2 years ago, obviously, we were in the throes of the Me Too movement, and we were seeing all these powerful male figures being deplatformed, and a lot of them rightly so. So it's called into question, like, all right, what is, not that those things should have ever been considered acceptable, but it's like, what is manhood? Because I'm looking at these people, some of these people who I admired or whatever, or like I'm thinking now about some of my own behavior that I didn't understand was problematic, but now I'm getting to a place where I can see that, and I'm not sure how to get better and educate myself before I'm canceled. You know what I mean, or whatever.
In the film industry,
Yes.
you'll see a lot of male figures be called out for things that they should definitely be called out for.
Yes.
Disgusting. But so your experience at the Black Solidarity Conference at Yale, for one, congratulations, even if
Thank you.
you was late on that. Big deal when I read that. What was that even like? What was that being on that campus and being at that?
Man, I mean, I wish I could go back. I really do. It was such a beautiful time. It's a conference. It's an annual conference, and you know, Black student unions from you know, universities across the country are invited. So Pace usually brings like, I guess, like anywhere between 7 and 10 people, is how many I think were on the trip. And it had been my first time. And you know, for me, who I, you know, I'm someone who kind of came into like this consciousness of myself as a Black person, as a Black man, a little bit later than some of my peers. You know, it was really just, it was beautiful for me to be around so many like positive, uplifting, educated Black folk. It was a 3 day, 2 or 3 day conference, like a weekend thing, and you know, they put us up in a very nice hotel. And you know, the point is, I mean, there are like workshops throughout the day, you know, that you can go to on your itinerary. You can usually only hit like 1 or 2 per day of all of them that are going on, and then you know, at night it's a bunch of you're still a bunch of college students. So so what happens happens. But like it's just so insane because I constantly talk to some of the guys that I was on that trip with. Um, and I'm like, man, like that was literally only February and it does feel like years ago. Just because of how much has transpired in between. But I definitely want to try to go again in the next semester. It would be my last opportunity to do so as a student. And yeah, I don't think I would miss it. I mean, hopefully they're able to host it.
Well, did you learn anything there in these workshops? Did you were you able to like network with other people? Like, what was the experience really?
Yeah. I mean, the first workshop I went to had to do with Black women in Christianity and like the history of the Black female preacher or pastor and minister, which was really interesting. They had a pastor from a church in Georgia. His name is Anthony Murray, I believe, and I think he runs up Oasis Church. You said you're in Georgia, right?
Currently, yes, I'm in South Georgia.
Yeah, so I think he's in Georgia. So maybe you'll come across him at some point in Georgia news. But yeah, yeah, he was there too, and he gave a little bit of a word about about purpose and uh, finding your purpose, being in the right place at the right time, stuff like that. But it was just interesting to kind of hear about the the history of Black women in the Black church, how the formation of the Black church, obviously as a response to uh, abolition, of slavery, and then um, the Bible being like the first book that a lot of Black people and a lot of Black Americans even learned how to read, if they did learn how to read at all. So that was that. I mean, some of the sometimes you can kind of get caught in an echo chamber as far as like going to a place where you are that is largely homogenous, at least physically, and socially. Not all the conversations that I was part of through these conferences were the most like, or through these workshops were the most, I guess, diverse in thought or opinion. And that's just, I mean, it's luck of the draw. Like you go to one or whatever, and sometimes also you don't feel like debating. Like sometimes you do want to go somewhere and have everything you think reaffirmed. But yeah, it was a nice mixture, and really the biggest benefit of it for me was the ability to socialize, to be uplifted by the presence of um, my Black and brown brothers and sisters. And yeah, there was even some light networking. I mean, the group me during that conference was insane. Like it was like 300 people or something, and the jokes never stopped.
So I see behind you your
Yes.
very own. What is that about? What does that entail?
I had to take a water break. Sorry. So Harlem's very own podcast is a podcast that is about to turn a year old in November. Thank you. We're about to start our fourth season. Um, I run it with my friend over there, Jude Steffers Wilson. Jude and I have been friends for 5 years. We met through the martial arts, and when I joined, he's always been my senior as far as rank because he was a black belt when I started at Garcia Gung Fu on the east side is where we train. I have always, not always, within the past few years, as podcasts have become more of a phenomenon, I tell people like I really think it's kind of the new YouTube in a way. Um, Even though YouTube is still popular, but like we all know how regulated it is and people get annoyed by that. Um, but I had wanted to start a podcast specifically. I've been talking about starting like a movie podcast for the longest, but that was still being formulated and who I wanted to do with and whatever. And Jude came to me one night and he was like, "Yo, bro, what do you?" And I still remember this like it was yesterday. He's like, "Bro, what do you think about us starting a podcast?" And I was like, he's like, "I feel like we have good conversations and chemistry, and like we could talk about a lot of different topics." And I was like, actually, yeah, let's try that. So that was in the fall of I guess that was in the fall of 2018. And then like we were kind of planning it for a really long time and, figuring out the equipment and all that, figuring out the name, I mean, I had the idea for Harlem's Very Own HVO like very early on. But then he was like, should we do that? Because like, will it make us seem too locked into just Harlem and New York stuff? But it just turned out to be the best option out of the alternatives we were considering. So it really is just a general conversationally based like talk show. We like to have guests on frequently. We like to recount current events, and then like our first episode, we talked about Kanye West after he had dropped Jesus is King. Um, Jude being an atheist and me being a Christian, that was an immediate like interesting point of conversation, and talking about like just Kanye in general and his history, and do we like is he someone that we can still look up to, or what. Our second episode we talked about the whole Ti fiasco when he talked about like taking his daughter to the gynecologist and all of that. So but then our third episode we talked about the UFC, and then our fourth episode we got a panel of our friends on to talk about music at the end of the year and the end of the decade, going through our top 5 albums, top 5 artists. That's still one of my favorite episodes. So we're looking to start season 4 in November. It is a lot of fun. It is a lot of work, but it's really it's very worthwhile when people like are listening and enjoying.
That's exciting. Congratulations to you and your podcast.
Thank you.
What's next for Justin Winley? What's next for you specifically?
Quite a few things. So I mean, even going back to that movie podcast idea, that is going to be up and running soon. I've locked down my 3 co-hosts for that. We're calling it the Media Morgue, and that's going to be kickstarting, if not before the end of this year, definitely by January.
I needed to make up names for something. Like that is awesome.
That is one thing I can do, is I can make up a name. That's going to be really fun. And I mean, obviously, like we've talked about, I'm a film and screen studies major, so anytime I can talk about film, I'm going to do it. So that's that. And then I've been working on a poetry collection called When a Black Boy Blushes that I'm looking to publish sometime next year. I've been sitting on that for many, many years, and I had an opportunity to kind of really buckle down and get some more content out, get some revisions done through quarantine, in conjunction with a program that Jada actually put me onto, New Degree Press at the Creators Institute. Not sure at this point whether or not I'll still be publishing with them, but I'll definitely I'm definitely grateful for the catapult as far as like getting stuff done. And I was also recently cast by a friend in a web series that she has written and is producing and directing called Hindsight, which is kind of like an Insecure type of show for IGTV, and we're going to start shooting that this month. So I mean, I was on the phone with a friend recently, and I guess maybe I'll say this as a final comment, because he's another actor friend of mine. He graduated the year after me in high school, and I called him to kind of just catch up and also really check with him about, after the death of Chadwick Boseman, I was like, I know a lot of Black male actors are feeling that right now. So I called my boy and I was like, hey man, how you doing? And we chatted about that for a little bit. And he was asking me how things were with me. And I said, it's funny, dude, because as crazy and morbid and exhausting a year as 2020 has been generally, it's also been personally one of the best years in a weird way for me. And it's like, I feel weird saying that. It's gotten to a point where like people would be offended by you even mentioning that. But it's like, I think honestly, if I've learned anything, it's that it's to not place the value of my life on what's going on externally, to rely more on really what is happening in my present moment, in my sphere of influence and control, such as it exists, and to be able to say like, yeah, you know, I'm doing all right, and that you and that can exist, and it doesn't deny the tragedies and atrocities going on in the world and the losses that we've all suffered. But that those two things can happen at the same time, you know, that and I guess that's always what I try to tell people, is that like, you know, we are much more complicated than we like to believe.
I can agree as well. 2020 has been a terrible year globally.
Yeah.
For me personally, I think 2020 is a year that I was able to lock down and really tell myself, okay, you need to do this, 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 and this, and also manifest those things and
Hmm.
be able to actually understand myself.
Hmm.
I think beforehand, we were all caught up in trying to catch up and do what other people are doing and just moving
Yeah.
fast, really.
Yeah.
And as selfish as this might sound, being able to slow down was probably the best thing that happened to me, because I'm able to do this podcast. Uh, this was a what's the word? This was an idea that I've had for so long, and
Hmm.
being in my capstone class and my teacher saying, "Okay, you need to do this. Like this is your time
Hmm.
to do it." I'm pretty sure if I wasn't locked down, I would probably be doing a film for my capstone.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
it's very interesting how this year has played out, and I'm happy that you're also playing out this year well as well.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for being on this podcast.
Thank
Just
you, Samantha. Yeah, this was a lot of fun, and I'm excited to support it. You know, when it comes out, not just because I'm on it, but like, you know, like I think that this is really cool what you're doing, and I'll definitely.